the time to push in all of your chips on the table is when you see a huge new unlock for a technology start to happen. And, I get that we're actually in a hypey moment of AI, but we're like, in the grand scheme of things, this is such early innings, more akin to when mobile was coming out. My sense is as soon as there's lockups end after the 6 months, people sell and they kind of go into just like regular public markets scrutiny, then that's when I think like a little bit of the music stops, because the investors, public market investors, are not VCs, and they're just going to keep looking and saying like, so this thing loses how much money for every dollar of revenue it makes?
Welcome to VC Uncovered, the series where we highlight the next generation of investors who move faster, take bigger risks, and build shoulder to shoulder with founders. I'm your host, Drew Glover, co-founder of Fiat Growth and general partner at Fiat Ventures.
Mercedes-Benz, so happy to have you here on VC Uncovered. Huge fan of you, have been throughout your career. I think I was able to be on a panel with you a couple of years ago with Steve McLaughlin over at FT Partners, and you were sharing some of your insights and was so impressed. And we got to reconnect recently at an event, and I was lucky enough to convince you to join the VC Uncovered podcast and newsletter. But I want to make sure the world gets to know more about you. So I'd love to just kick things off by you telling us a little bit more about you and what you're building.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad we got to reconnect. And God, that was so long ago. That feels like another lifetime. What have I been up to since then? Well, I started a new VC firm. My new VC firm premise, co-founded with Vanessa Larco, is kind of the brainchild of our dreams. Like the last 15 years experience working in tech and in finance and venture capital, I feel like it's all accumulated and driven me to this point where I'm trying to create the VC firm of the future, and really the VC firm I wish I had access to back when I was a startup operator and founder. And so it has been really the work of kind of like our blood, sweat, and tears. And we're so glad to be getting it off the ground and investing and having great founders be part of our network now. And yeah, prior to this, I spent 6 years at Lightspeed Venture Partners, where I was a partner doing a lot of investing in early stage. And before that, I used to be an operator. I helped grow other people's startups from 2 to 100, from 0 to 25. I was also the founder of my own startup. And before that, I used to work in financial services. So I worked at the Federal Reserve and Goldman Sachs during the last crisis. And it was fun to like kind of live those many different lives. I feel like we're now in another bull market cycle, which is so fascinating to me to see. But it's like the first time I've been a professional with with enough experience to do something like push forward a strategy that you really believe in during a market cycle. And so I'm pretty excited about it.
I love it. And, obviously you've had enough experience in your career and enough time throughout your career to, one, experience what works and what doesn't work within like a really good venture ecosystem, but two, been in it enough time to be able to see a couple different cycles. So I'm curious, as you talk about like building the firm of your dreams, how have you kind of curated and are currently building that, keeping in mind of, now that you have a full kind of first party exposure to what cycles look like and also what works and what doesn't work in some of these different kind of venture ecosystems?
Yeah, I think that, on the cycle, one of the things I've learned is like the time to push in all of your chips on the table is when you see a huge new unlock for a technology start to happen. And, I get that we're actually in a hypey moment of AI, but we're like, in the grand scheme of things, this is such early innings, more akin to when mobile was coming out than it is to like, the end of the mobile cycle, which was like 2021. And so I feel like that is really important to have your own checkbook and be able to do it how you want. I think in terms of like what I think needs to be done a little bit differently. I also think that the last cycle created venture capital as a household name in the US. Like back in the mid 2000s, VC was still kind of under the radar. There hadn't been the top of the S&P 500 totally taken over by formerly VC-backed tech companies. back in the mid 2000s, before the mobile cycle, finance was still kind of, I would say, like the peak economy in the US. And we had just gone through the dot-com crash, so everyone thought like tech was dead. Like it was kind of like the early innings of the internet in most of America's mind. But then now, fast forward like 15, 20 years later, we have this point where we're at the part where everyone in the US recognizes, okay, VC is a big thing. And what's that led to is like tons and tons of tourists coming into the venture capital world, but also people not, I feel like the discipline of what venture used to be, which used to be a very hand-to-hand combat, like unearthing rare gems, lots of like on the ground sourcing field, turned into almost like an asset management game that crossover private equity, hedge funds, they were all like, oh, this is the hot asset class. Like I can do that too. And like we kind of saw that they like tried to do it a little bit. We remember like what Tiger was doing and Kotu and everybody, like a lot of the crossovers, but that's just to me like a completely different phase of venture that was exasperated by how hypey our field got. And so
Yeah.
my view of like the venture firm of the future is like return to the basics. Like we need to focus on pre-seed and seed, ground game, understanding what qualities make incredible founders in the future and how to systematically source them via relationship driven investing, not via like, oh, I saw someone switch to their profile to stealth. I crossover like fund have written this great algorithm that's going to like automatically reach out to all of them and offer like the top 25% a check, you know? And I feel like we had become an index play, and I'm basically I'm doing the anti of that.
I absolutely love that. And I know we've spoken about this, but even at Fiat Ventures, we are huge just community believers and like tripling down on that as a strategy. One thing that we talked about, especially as we were learning more so we could write the newsletter piece of this, is what you've done is you've really been focusing on building community as this deal flow engine, but you're not building a scout network. You're not just looking to, again, like you said, just take a ton of folks out to breakfast or coffee over some algorithm, but you've really focused on like engineers and researchers through, I believe your platform is called Surreal, where you actually are using them to find the next generation of really incredible founders. Would love to dive in a little bit deeper to that.
Yeah, and Surreal is one of the communities we run. It's the largest and definitely the one that we like prototype and guinea pig the most. I think
Cool.
the what Surreal is it started as a monthly dinner series for top engineers and researchers. Actually, the very first one was not even like full dinner, but it was at my house in my living room. And
Sick.
then we transitioned it to art galleries. Now it's exclusively at art galleries. Surreal is a space for us, for engineers and technical talent, to discuss the latest developments in AI and the latest research, how it's impacting how we build, how we think about deploying agents, how we think about making more efficient models. And I thought that was a really important space that needed like in-person community, because and the thing I was hearing from everybody is like, everything's changing so fast. On Twitter, you're constantly reading the news and being like, oh my God, another person beat the benchmark. This happened, and you feel a bit behind. And so when you're also in your startup, you're supposed to be heads down. You're supposed to be focused on your customers. Like, how do you get that outlet to have people who can help you be up to speed with what's going on in a real trusted manner without feeling like doom scrolling on X is the only way that you're knowing you're behind? And so I thought of all of these various things. I've also run a bunch of technical communities in my past. I ran the first Ruby on Rails meetup in New York back in
Cool.
2013. I ran the Scout Fund, which was another version of a community, a tech community, but investor focused, when I was at Lightspeed in 2020. And then now I'm running Surreal and Sci-Fi Tech Club. And so to me, it was kind of like, okay, know how to do it. It's something that like comes like the back of my hand for me. And it's really important and needed in this moment. So that was like the impetus. And then in terms of like, how does it fit into that like big strategy that we were talking about? I think because of that cycle effect, everyone's gotten very lazy. We have a ton of AI generated sloppy outbound going to
Yes.
founders. And the antithesis to that is real in-person community, things they wanted to go to of their own volition that they don't think is at all like being put on because a VC is trying to recruit them. We have, had 5,200 people apply to Surreal in the past year and hundreds attend. Um, most of them don't even realize there's a VC behind it, which is kind of great. And like you could argue to me, oh, then that's just wasted resources. But I don't think so because we're trying to build a truly authentic, interest-based community. We don't want to be too on the nose. The minute you're like saying, hey, here's office hours for VCs, come and talk about your idea. It's like now people are posturing. Now they're
Yeah.
putting up a facade. I want to get to know the real you who is real time working out in their head as they're sitting there, a software engineer at Vercel, thinking I might go start a startup one day. I want to see that whole journey with you and have you naturally come to it because you heard from your friends that they were getting a lot of value out of it and you saw there was an event that a speaker you wanted to meet was speaking at. Like that should be the draw in, never the VC. And then later on, if you engage and you like the community and you're in our WhatsApp and you're reading all of the AMAs and you're, consuming all of the content every day and you're like, wow, this is great. I'm like meeting so many cool people. Then you find out then you might think, who is this person, Mercedes, who keeps messaging me? And
Yeah.
then at that point, I'm happy to engage with you if you want to talk about any startup stuff. But that's really how we've thought about it and how it fits into our broader vision of the VC firm of the future.
I love that. And VCs have been talking a lot about what moats still exist today. And I think this goes along with brand, but community is a huge moat. That is nothing that is an unpromptable thing. You can't recreate it on AI. Like that is an in-person experience, one where you have to build and nurture serious relationships. And I think what I love most about it is you don't have a goal to find a founder by going to a dinner. You have a goal of getting a slew of meaningful touches over months or even years. So when they stumble upon what they want to do next, you're already top of mind. I'm
Um,
curious, like, what is that community magic that you've been able to learn by creating multiple communities where you said when you started Premise, we have to do this. I can run this playbook in my sleep and I know it's going to work because it's worked before.
yeah. And I appreciate that you say you think communities are special. Like I sometimes have a like negative reaction when people even like because community is the right word, but I almost have a negative reaction to that word because I think a lot of people think of it as like soft, like touchy feely, not like value. And to me,
Yeah.
it's like it's a valuable network, but you got to treat it like a community. And
Yep.
so I don't know. I think though, when I think about like why, like it's kind of like anytime you're building a new company, and I tell this to founders all the time, you have to think about like what skills are you best in the world at, and how do you turn that into an economic engine. And anything you love to do that just comes naturally is probably the place to start. And so, I kind of just started doing it. I didn't really know if this was going to be a thing or what it was going to become, but I know that I like convening people. I know I can do it super high volume. I know I can get the magic, as you said, to be felt. I think the magic itself is because I always think about it from like a product positioning perspective. Like when does someone hit the magic moment in our product?
Yeah.
And there's two times they might hit the magic moment. Like the first time is when they show up at that first dinner and they realize they're in an art gallery with incredible artwork on the wall. And we're literally sitting underneath these massive paintings and sculptures. And there's candles on the table and they sit down next to someone and they realize that they have very similar interest and they seem like, oh, and the other person on the other side of me also had really similar interest. That's that first magic moment when they hear the dinner speaker talk, and then when they go up to them afterward and tell them a little bit about what they're working on and thinking about and get real feedback. That's the second magic moment. And then there's really latent magic moments that happen later too. But when they walk away from that first dinner totally buzzed and realize like I got a couple of customers. I have a potential person I could hire, a potential co-founder. Those are the like magic moments I think of that all can happen in a span of 2 hours.
Yep.
And then they continue to get doubly downed once they get in the WhatsApp. They join it and they realize 10 people they already know are in it that weren't at that dinner, but that had come to a previous dinner. And they go,
Yeah.
oh my God, you guys went too? That's like a fourth magic moment. And then when the conversation is going in the WhatsApp and they're real time saying, oh my God, that's the problem I'm dealing with right now at 11:59 at night. And someone was able to answer it. Like that's a fifth magic moment. So I think of building a really special community as like a series of magic moments. You need some to hit people immediately. Like if they're not very impressed when they first get there, and it takes too long, if it took all the way to the WhatsApp to get to your magic moment, like I'm going to lose you because that's way too much time. But I
Yeah.
also don't only want one at the beginning because I don't want like shock and awe. I want to like draw out the magic experience for you to just like keep coming back and feeling like it's amazing.
I absolutely love that. Quick speed question. Like what's one community or network hack that like you can't live without right now?
Luma,
Yeah.
I think it has to be Luma.
Shout out to Luma. Um, we're big Luma fans over here as well.
You guys use
Yes.
them a lot?
We use Luma. We only use Luma, and I forget what the other one is, but I sometimes get invited.
Partyful?
Yeah, Partiful. I feel like there's everyone using Partiful is probably a VC that invested in Partiful, but like Luma to me is just one that it gets me. Also, it got me first, so I'm locked in.
Luma has way more business oriented features. Partyful is really social in my mind in terms of a lot of the stuff if you want to manage, like backend is just way better on
Yeah,
Luma.
yeah. I love it, and just also, I just believe that the future of VC is not just capital. Capital is a commodity. At the end of the day, here, if you don't have capital plus other things, then
Yeah.
like you are very much behind the ball. Unless you're just one of the really big ones that just has the ability to write $100 million checks in the seed round. Which brings me to my next point that I want to touch on is something that I've heard you talk about is like your hope and your wish that the AI bubble pops soon. As an early stage investor similar to you, I think I understand that, but like tell me a little bit more about like where you sit in this kind of AI craze and this, as you said it earlier, this hype cycle that we're sitting in the middle of.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm no short seller. I don't have like any, position like where I'm
Yeah,
economically
for the
hoping that,
record. Yeah.
that everything, but like, I do think like on the one hand, yeah, of course, I'm glad that AI is doing well, but I think overhype creates like um, a artificial like I think of 2021. It creates an
Yes.
artificial sense of reality around what valuations are, what round sizes are, and it increases the velocity at which investable capital gets lost. And so like as someone running a fund, like I just don't that's not always the best. I mean, there's also ways you can benefit from it, of course. I can invest in something that gets marked up super fast to a billion. And that can be a great outcome for me because other folks are hypey. I think we are already starting to see a little bit of this wane at the earliest stages. Like I think VCs are already feeling neo-lab fatigue. But at the same time, I don't think the broader market has fully priced in like later stage anything. It's just still like straight hype. And so what I think it's going to happen actually, there's a couple of things. I think there's like five things that could happen, but increasingly as it's reported that OpenAI and Anthropic might go public in the next like 6 to 12 months, my sense is as soon as there's lockups end after the 6 months, people sell and they kind of go into just like regular public markets scrutiny, then that's when I think like a little bit of the music stops because the investors, public market investors, are not VCs, and they're just going to keep looking and saying, like, so this thing loses how much money for every dollar of revenue it makes? And we don't have an answer to more efficient models. So
Yeah.
I think it's like a if, not an if, just like a when. And I don't know, I'd love your take on like when you think it is. It
Yeah.
feels
No,
like it's coming soon.
I had a very similar belief, and I was doing my normal Twitter, Instagram business surfing, and Chamath has lots of different thoughts, but he had a really good point where he was talking about how there's going to be these IPOs, but very soon after, whatever it is, Claude, Cursor, some of these really big, these ones that are like almost valued at $1 trillion, like, there's just not enough money in the space to prop these things up once they go public. So there might be one or two that go public over the next 12 months. And sure, like we'll see them like remain, but there's not room for six different $1 trillion companies to come into the market. And there's not enough money in the market for it to prop them up and keep that hype going. I think you're right. Some of these public investors are going to see what the balance sheet looks like, and then they're going to keep looking and realizing that a lot of the story that's being told is around the hype and a promise of what could be. But what could be, I think, is still much further off than most people think, because these private stories in the private markets that are being told, they're getting grander and grander and grander. The more time goes by without them going public. There's a couple interesting ones, like I think like a Stripe versus an OpenAI are two very different stories. But as we sit here in this AI, where like it's AI native companies that are raising $30 billion rounds, it's just not scalable. And so,
Nope.
I get excited about what AI is going to do, but I am, as an early stage investor, as I keep saying, a lot of investors, especially investors that have a lot of money, have been underwriting the anomaly instead of underwriting the median. Meaning they're underwriting businesses based on them getting to $100 million in revenue like a Gamma did in like 7 months, instead of underwriting it as a business it's going to maybe get $5 million in revenue over the next year. I still think it's going to push the speed that people can get revenue, but it's just not going to be this anomaly that everyone's chasing right now.
I completely agree. And so we'll see like how much time that ends up taking. But I also think there's a couple of other horsemen, like in addition to the whole post public markets crash, I think there could also be these huge security incidents we keep hearing about. If there
Yes.
ends up being like a massive security outage that affects like huge enterprise companies, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of customers in the US, I think you also start to see a lot of pressure if we ever get to this whole like the feared words bailout that were being used by some of the largest labs. Like if that ever starts to be a real going concern in government, I think that's also something that will have like huge political backlash. I think that there's also like this one's more latent and I think it'll stay mostly under the radar, but the whole element of like if somehow public uh like sentiment was to totally flip that, just like it's stealing all of our jobs,
True.
there's really like high unemployment rate that suddenly spikes on a level of like COVID in a specific really critical area. I think those are all openings that can be manifested and captured by a savvy political operator that could cause trouble for the industry.
I agree, and I think the same thing goes for the energy crisis that we're under right now as well. Like there's a lot of like macro political moves that could be made if it were to like spread like wildfire that could quickly shift public sentiment. And I think
Oh, sure.
because we're living in such a retail investing world right now, with Robinhood and like all these like public sentiment is not big hedge funds anymore. It is equal parts individuals that are investing $10,000 that are just like moving social commentary and social sentiment. So super fascinating. I think that we're definitely, moving very close to a bubble. It's just like is the balloon going to pop, or is air just going to like slowly leave it? I have no idea.
Yep, totally. And we have an election in 2028. Like that rhetoric around like what they think their voters care most about, if it's income loss due to AI, like that'll be a major going concern.
Yeah. And no doubt. I mean, jobs are obviously being left. We're feeling it the most right now in tech jobs. So like, the 80% of the US that's like truly at risk, they're just not feeling it as much yet. But I mean, it's coming. I've walked through some shops where they're showing technologies that plan on replacing hundreds of thousands of jobs across the grouping of individuals that need jobs the most.
Yep,
Yeah.
totally.
Um, all right. Like we dug into that.
Yeah. There's the whole like
Talks.
we could go all the way down that path of the jobs front if we want to talk about like entry level roles and how that's the
Yeah,
field.
let's do that.
Yeah.
Tell me like, what are your like what are your general thoughts about like what the future of work looks like? I spend a lot of my time thinking about that, and know there was one interesting. So we were thinking about partnering with this company that's doing a lot of work across different campuses, across college campuses to help promote entrepreneurship. And one thing that we learned is like even freshmen and sophomores now are just trying to create their own businesses, partly because the cost of building is zero now in many different fronts, but also because, and they were openly saying this, they're just afraid that there's not a job waiting for them when they graduate.
Yep.
And so
And
I feel like this shift is going to be massive.
we're almost at an all-time peak again for the number of businesses that are created in a single month. We're almost at an all-time peak right now. The last time we were at that was back in COVID. And so I do really think like this is a phenomenon where people are increasingly starting their own company in order to counteract against some of this. I think the biggest question is just that like what AI does is essentially serves as as an entry level role in accounting, coding, engineering. And so the question becomes like, well, if that's been automated away, like what do new first time job entrants to the job market do? And I think they either have to, like, to your point, like I'm going to start a business, or I'm going to build, like, I'm actually just going to learn how to manage a ton of AI. And so that's mostly the advice I give to most young folks. Like, I think the economy almost always works itself out. The only constant that we see over time is that the introduction of more technology actually makes us work more. And it's like classic capitalism. If an economist were to say to you, like, how do you think it unfolds if one person has a robot that makes them 5x more productive? Do they just do that and stop working? Or do they actually build 5 robots and make sure they're like getting even more money? You know, like people
Yeah.
try to profit maximize. And so I think increasingly, like, that's what capitalism is going to do. It's going to work itself out. It is going to mean more haves and have nots. And the only thing that you can do to kind of like save yourself as a new market job entrant is to figure out how to work with the new technology and how to manage
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess another thread to that is I actually believe that it's going to force people to have multiple full and part-time jobs to create their own full-time salary. And I think it's gonna shift what a worker looks like. I think we're probably, like, from a macro standpoint, going to have to shift how 1099s are dealing with taxes, dealing with benefits. Like, I think that entire infrastructure is going to have to be rethought, because the W-2 worker is going to shift. There's going to be a lot less of them. I think people are going to have, maybe 3 or 4 different jobs that are going to create their full-time salary. And I think it's going to be really exciting from like an entrepreneurial standpoint, but the current infrastructure benefits the W-2 employee on a level that, like, really no other type of worker gets benefited. My wife's a hairstylist, and she's thinking about different things she can start doing on top of doing hair, and like me just sitting down with her thinking about what that means from like a household perspective, from a tax perspective, from making sure that she can optimize in the most effective way. It is crazy complicated. And so, yeah, I think it's just interesting that whole future piece. And again, the employee benefits, healthcare, all these different things that go along with it. Kind of a messy space that the right founder is going to have to make sense of it pretty soon here.
Yep, totally. Yeah. Well, that's cool that your wife's doing that and also picking up some other stuff.
Yeah, well, it's fun when I can sit at the computer at 10 at night while she's watching a show. I'm like, oh, you want to do that? And then I just start tinkering around, and I just show her a fully built website with like a Slack or a Stripe integration. She's like,
Yeah.
oh, like, all of a sudden I'm getting really creative here. What else can we do? So it's a fun time to play and test for sure.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. Um, Jumping to like the last topic here, you really talk about, the behavioral economics of the investor bias. And it was a really meaty topic that we kind of like dove into during the newsletter. And I would love for you to just like share your general outlook on your perspective there.
Yeah. I love behavioral economics because it explains the irrationality in everyday economic and financial decisions. And as as people who work in the field, like, we just know how emotional investing
Yes.
can be. And like cognitive science is the study of how our brain makes decisions and processes all the inputs and information. that we're receiving in the world. And that layer on top of economics is really useful because when something happens that causes my brain chemistry to go awry and start feeling panicked and kind of activates like my fight or flight feeling when I see like a number falling, oh, it turns out that's called like loss aversion, and I need to be really conscientious of it. And so I've always used it for investing as a way to both identify founders who understand those emotional triggers and pulls, because actually the same things are present in value prop creation. I find the founders who are most in tune with behavioral economics actually build the most magical products. So it's a great filtering criteria for being able to understand what people will build. And I really pressure tested in terms of thinking through like, do they understand what the user is going to feel when they sign up, and like why, like the things we started out talking about, like what is that
Yeah.
magic moment? Are there multiple of them? How do they cascade? How does that turn into KPIs? Like you should be able to follow the line all the way through. So
Yep.
that's like one way I use it, is diligence. And then another way is then obviously just like managing the entire fund and thinking through different decisions I have to make, managing my own conviction, managing my ability to hold my ground when I think an investment is good, but the market hasn't, really felt or hasn't really landed on my opportunity yet. And how do you still just have that kind of like unnerving faith in people, as well as like when to know when to take things off the table and do so systematically. I think like these are the hard parts. Like all of investing can be boiled down to like buy low, sell high. And
Yeah.
strangely, the inputs to those are hard, and the emotional decisions of when to do so are hard. But if
Yep.
you like really find quality that you can buy low and then have discipline, both the discipline to buy it low and the discipline to sell it, that's like where I take a lot of my venture capital behavioral economics feeling.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I think commercially, anyone that's not a VC or anyone that's getting started as VC, I'm sure is thinking, oh, like these are people that, the best VCs are the ones that can just follow their instinct. And then, instinct is an emotional thing. It can be trained to be less emotional, but it's like, a lot of it's very emotional. So I am curious, what are your thoughts around like when to follow that like emotional instinct versus when to bring in that more like analytical approach? Like, is there any moments where you're like, when I get that feeling, that emotional feeling, I know it's like it is the magic? Or are you always throttling that back whenever you feel it, kind of like thinking that it's more of something that you need to like, it's more of a warning sign than anything else?
I think it's not enough on its own. Like a lot of times you need to love the founder, you need to love the product, you need to love the business. Even if the market opportunity isn't huge today, you see a business opportunity to a large market, and you also need to love the deal. And so
Yep.
sometimes you can get really emotionally hijacked around one element, say the founder or the vision, but the rest of it doesn't all line up. And that's when actually the training and the discipline to
Mm,
counteract some of the parts you're excited about, but to rationalize over like this isn't everything I'm excited about really has to kick in. And I find that is where I use that training a lot. Because
yeah.
otherwise, like I get so excited about founders sometimes on my very first meeting with them. I'm like, oh my goodness, they're great. And then I think it through and I'm like, well, it's a terrible deal. And maybe they're just good at talking. And like there's always a little bit more pressure testing you could do.
Yeah, no, I love that. The discipline of making sure all the boxes that matter most to you are checked versus letting one or two blind you from the rest, which I know we've all been in the middle of and be like, oh, well, they have that, then they'll figure everything else out. When we all know like that's an emotional mistake that can get in the way of a lot of your biggest mistakes or, occasionally one of your biggest wins. But even another part of discipline is not letting, a mistake that you made that turned into a win become an outlier that you're like, oh, like I need to start chasing that for some weird reason, which we've all been a part of as well.
Yep, totally.
Love it. All right. I want to round this out with a couple speed questions that I typically ended with. Feel free to answer these with like one word or a full sentence, but they're meant to be quick. The first one being, if you could be the CEO of any Fortune 500 or Fortune 50 company that's not in fintech, what would it be?
Oof, that's so hard. Um, Apple? It is, it's not in fintech, exactly. I mean, they have Apple Pay, but
Yeah, I love that.
I mean, talk about a company that gets to like decide last and always wins.
Yeah. And I mean, Tim Cook's leaving. So, you know, our boy Turnus, we'll see. Maybe you can take his job if it doesn't work out after the first year. Um, Love that. What's your biggest AI hack that you're like obsessed with today?
I love using Willow Voice, which is one of the voice dictation tools.
Yeah.
And I am an investor in it, so I do have to give that caveat. But I absolutely love it. Like I use it so many times every day to speed up my writing to the point that my fingers are atrophying, like the muscles in my wrist and forearm are atrophying because of how much I now talk to my computer. Voice
Oh,
is
I
by
love
far
that.
my favorite AI invention.
Yeah. Have you played with Whisper at all? At least in
I
the
have
diligence?
a little bit, yeah. I think Willow has some cool differentiated features around like in what you say, the
Yeah.
intent, instead of just like dictating exactly what you did say, it understands what you wanted it to write.
Yep. Love. What is the first kind of like business thing that you do every morning? Like when you open your computer, open your phone, like what's the first thing you're doing?
I normally am in bed and I check all my like core apps, which is like email, text message, iMessage, WhatsApp, LinkedIn. Those are the
Yeah.
first four.
Checks out. Checks out. Um, I got another hack question for you. Top wellness hack.
Zinc by far.
Like as in just like zinc. You take pills, you
Like
got
pills, oral, zinc. Like I have incredibly bad allergies and I'm always sick. Or I used to always be sick growing up because like when you have a moist like when you have a lot of allergies and it's always kind of wet in your nasal passages, you're more actually likely to get sick. And
mm,
so I just have a weak immune system too. Zinc is the only thing that speeds up the production of your white blood cells and actively shortens the length of a cold or an like common cold. And so I take it anytime I feel like the slightest hint of a scratchy throat. And that's how I basically survive not being like a bumbling, constantly mucusy mess.
oh dude, I gotta go get a little bit of that zinc. I'll go get it at Whole Foods next time I get there. I go there.
Have to take it on a full stomach. That's the big caveat. Because if you're going to take this 50 milligram, it's intense. You
Go
will
get
throw
you.
up if you do it on like a
You
banana.
take it every day?
No, just when I'm feeling sick.
Okay, okay, good. Okay, this is good for anyone listening. Uh, Last question. If you had to invest in one vertical that you don't currently invest in, let's say you had a $50 million fund, you had to invest in like that pre-seed seed. What is that vertical you'd invest in you don't currently invest in?
Oof, 50 million. Because that's a good question. I was going to say space tech, but I'd want a bigger than a 50 million fund for
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Um, Probably like cybersecurity. I don't
It's a
invest
fun
in
space.
cybersecurity. I don't really understand it. I wish I did because that sector has like the greatest EBITDA and revenue multiples of any category. My God, like those companies, if you get to 100 million in like ARR, you're set
Yeah.
for life, you know?
It's sticky. People stay on there for 20 years. Like if you catch one of those like pain waves in cybersecurity, you're riding a good wave.
You are riding a good wave versus other sectors that I invest in. You get to 100 million and you're like, great, I still need to get to 500 million to be like
Yeah.
a really, really valuable company.
Oh yeah. Well, the fun spaces we lean into.
Yeah.
Mercedes, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for joining VC Uncovered. Thank you for the great conversation. And of course, I'll continue to be your biggest fan as you continue to make Premise special and keep building your incredible networking community.
Thank you. This was so fun. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
This season is supported by Silicon Valley Bank. For decades, Silicon Valley Bank has been a true partner to the innovation economy, helping both founders and funders grow. Silicon Valley Bank, a division of First Citizens Bank, member FDIC. Please note, this podcast is for informational purposes and not investment, financial, or legal advice. The views expressed are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the position of Silicon Valley Bank.